everyone. I have with me Jamie Manirakiza and Evie. They are with PEHT, that's Partnership to End Human Trafficking. Jamie has over 10 years experience in the anti-human trafficking field, working as the executive director of Partner to End Human Trafficking. And Evie serves as the creative director of social media of Partner to End Human Trafficking. Can you tell us a little bit about yourselves and what inspired you to get involved in the fight to end human trafficking?
I'm happy to start and then I'll turn it over to Evie. I have been working in the field of social services and social work since 2009, and I have always had a long-standing just passion and interest to help women and girls to fight against gender-based violence and exploitation. As I began working as a social worker in Philadelphia, I met a number of individuals who were resettling and migrating to the United States from Southeast Asia, and I learned about a lot of experiences of human trafficking that those individuals had. And when I began to have more conversations locally here in the United States, my eyes were opened to the prevalence of particularly sex and labor trafficking here domestically. And I have spent my career educating the public on both sex and labor trafficking and trying to provide residential and care services for individuals who are trying to leave exploitation and rebuild their lives. And it's something that I have committed my life to doing.
So I have a history of sexual exploitation and trafficking. And so that being said, and being someone who has done a lot of healing from that, and someone who's always had a heart to help other people, I naturally fell into advocacy.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And Evie, I really appreciate you telling us that part of your story. Can you explain what it is that PEHT does in the field of human trafficking?
Partnership to End Human Trafficking has a three-pronged approach to addressing the issue. We educate, embrace, and empower. Our education and our advocacy efforts and awareness raising so that we can increase identification of new individuals who are being victimized by the crime of human trafficking in our region. We are headquartered in Connecticut, but we serve individuals regardless of their state or country of origin. Our second strategy is to provide residential care, 2-year free transitional housing and recovery services for individuals who are seeking long-term transitional housing options. And in our residential care program, we provide in-house case management, on-site groups and healing workshops, as well as connecting individuals with community resources for substance misuse, healthcare, dental, counseling, and trauma-informed care services. We also provide intensive community case management for individuals who are escaping forms of trafficking and cannot immediately find shelter. So we will do immediate crisis response for our partners throughout the state. We also provide employment opportunities through an in-house employment business called the Pet Shop. We're on-ramps and low-barrier employment for individuals who so wish to work there. And we do job training, financial literacy, computer literacy, and other pro-employment development skills.
Jamie, can you speak to, and Evie as well, can you speak to the importance of connecting survivors with resources to help them after they've gotten out of the life that is human trafficking?
Evie, did you want to jump into that, or do you want me to go?
Sure. Frankly, if there weren't resources available to me, I feel like it would have been like a spiral for me. Situations that I was in, I wouldn't have gotten out if it wasn't for housing such as PEHT, and I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for PEHT. Definitely, it's very, very important, very important.
I've definitely heard that the hardest part isn't rescuing or helping someone to escape the life, but it really is helping them to stay out of it, because while I'm not a survivor of human trafficking, I'm a survivor of domestic abuse, and there's a little bit of a connection there in terms of like how the manipulation and gaslighting works to keep someone in space. And it's said that it takes a woman 7 to 10 times before she will finally leave that relationship for good. I mean, it sounds like that's very similar to what it's like trying to leave the life of human trafficking, that you're drawn back into it because that's what you know. Would you say that that's accurate?
It was similar for me, yeah.
We often see that there's a process of trauma bonding that is often common in forms of trafficking, particularly on sex trafficking side, where individuals may have a level of loyalty or relationship and a bond to their trafficker, and may return more than once before they can leave, or feel safe to leave, or feel ready to leave. And those are all parts of the elements of the crime, the force, fraud, and coercion. And it's really important to have services that are flexible and low barrier, so individuals have long-term access to engage when they're ready. When they hit that point where they're ready to leave, you want to be ready to also receive them and give them the support that they need.
So how do you approach a situation where a survivor may be hesitant to seek help?
So I can jump in. Evie, you're welcome to add to what I have to say. So it depends. If somebody expresses an interest, we'll meet them where they're at in that time and space in which they're requesting services. So we do provide a level of crisis intervention. So if somebody calls and they are experiencing homelessness right in that moment, because maybe they got kicked out of an unsafe house that they were in with their exploiter, we don't have a 24/7 shelter, although that's incredibly needed. So we will put folks up in a hotel, which isn't ideal, but it's at least a place that could be safe. We might move them from the location that they're in, provide them with food, clothing, toiletries, and support, emotional support right away with a case manager. And we'll work with that person to safety plan and decide what are their best next steps. Similar to how in domestic violence individuals are safety planning, I think with trafficking situations, another unique nuance is there may also be other facilitators of the trafficking in addition to the main trafficker that are putting pressure on an individual to not talk, to come back, to keep quiet or compliant with whatever the coercion and force were. So we often recognize that folks have a lot of competing pressures that are on them when they're trying to leave.
Partner to End Human Trafficking uses the sanctuary model, trauma-informed care. Can you explain what this model looks like and how it plays a role in supporting survivors?
So the sanctuary model was not developed by PEHT, but we do utilize that as one of our just organizational structures in how we orient and train team members. And it's meant to flatten the hierarchy amongst staff and those we serve as a service provider. The main way that can be helpful to think about it is there's 7 tenets and values of the sanctuary model. So open communication, democracy, shared responsibility, safety, nonviolence. These are all commitments that we orient ourselves to as a community. And how that might play out is the way that we apply those to situations. So in a residential recovery home, you will inevitably have conflict, because when people are living together, we have conflict with each other. We may disagree on something. We might work through pain or past mistrust that we've had, and that may play out in community. And so the sanctuary model provides tools and a language for both participants of our program and staff to communicate using the same shared values. So we consider gossip, for example, to be a form of violence. So when we say when we live here, we're committing to these values, we're also committing to not talking behind each other's back. We're going to bring things openly to community. We're going to talk about them in a new way, in a healthy way, where we can resolve and move forward. So it provides sort of a structure to orient ourselves and to have a shared language. It also helps staff to understand that all of us, staff, those that we serve, everybody has some level of experience of trauma, whether big T trauma, small T trauma, and we need to approach each other with empathy and compassion. And so recognizing that it's not always personal. So when somebody gets upset, we're not going to respond always in a negative way, right? Because that can make somebody feel even less safe. And so we need to model recognizing that somebody might be reacting out of their trauma experience. And so that allows me as a staff member to not take it so personally if maybe somebody in community raised their voice or got upset. And that allows for people to create new patterns and to create new ways of communicating. That's a little bit. I could go on a lot about Sanctuary Model. I don't know, Evie, if you want to talk about Sanctuary at all. We did a group about, on Wednesdays we wear pink ones at the house, and we talked about building community as women and as fellow residents, and we applied some of the values of Sanctuary in that group.
Can you speak to the importance of incorporating survivor leadership into the organization, decision-making, advocacy?
And Evie, maybe if you want to talk about your role and different aspects of which I think you've been able to do advocacy. You know, PEHT just has a commitment to believing that folks are more than their story. So we really believe that survivors who come through our program have so many skill sets, right? So they just need the opportunity and the barriers to be removed to be able to live to their self-actualization. We really believe that we should be creating job opportunities for individuals should they want them, whether they come through our program or they're a survivor in the community that's applying for a job at PEHT, but to be a part of all aspects of PEHT's leadership and our program development and our business development, in marketing, in research and design of new products, sales, development, really trying to engage individuals who come through our services, when the time is right and they feel ready in their healing process for part-time or full-time work, that's just really important to work from a place of experience, lived experience, whether it's public-facing or non-public facing. But creating those job opportunities is really important to PEHT and important to any survivor care program, should be important.
I hadn't really thought of the fact that it's creating jobs for people. And the way I've always seen it is, who better to speak on the matter or touch the lives of people who are in that situation than the people who've come out of it. Human trafficking can be such a complex situation to help someone with, and people looking from the outside in have a lot of misconceptions, and it can be really hard to understand if you don't have a rounded view of what's going on. So it makes sense to incorporate people who know firsthand and who want to help.
It's really been great working with PEHT, especially, I don't know if you're aware, Paris, but I was the first resident, actually. I got to be a big part of helping to kind of create and shape the pet shop. And so, kind of coming up with prototypes for the leashes and stuff like that. And so that was a great experience for me. And just having worked with the shop for as long as I have, it's the longest job I've ever held. And it's becoming a career for me, and it's amazing. And with my advocacy, it's really allowing me to take all the pain that I've endured and turn it into something good. It's always kind of been that feeling of, if I could just help one person, then it would have meaning. And I feel like I've kind of been coming into that through my work with PEHT.
That's amazing. How do you handle a situation where a survivor has maybe endured multiple kinds of exploitation. I know that PEHT also works with survivors of labor trafficking, not just sex trafficking. So, what do you see as far as the intersectionality of those two types of trafficking, and how might you help someone who's in a situation like that?
PET serves anybody regardless of their state or country of origin and type of trafficking. We actually recently received a Department of Justice grant, Office for Victims of Crime, and we are partnering with another agency, Catholic Charities of Fairfield County in our region, to do legal services for particularly any individual labor or sex trafficked, but we often find that a lot of individuals who are labor trafficked in the United States also have legal needs. They may be foreign born and need legal options to pursue so that they can be safe to leave their trafficker. And so we partner up with experts to do that type of work. We often see in terms of the intersectionality that women, we've had a few cases over the past couple of years, and I could say we'd probably have many more if we were doing targeted outreach. But we remain at capacity across our programs, so we're often finding that we're responding to referrals and not even getting the opportunity to go out and really even reach for more cases. So we know that there's many more people out there that we haven't yet identified. But we've had particularly women who have come forward with forms of labor exploitation. Maybe they're doing domestic service work, nanny work, cleaning work. Maybe they are in construction. We've had some women who have worked as part of construction teams and crews, and they've been unpaid, poorly treated. And we've also had situations where individuals have identified as being labor exploited and sexually assaulted. So whether both of those crimes rise to the level of being criminally prosecuted, as both sex and labor trafficking is on the law enforcement side, but as a service provider, we recognize the trauma and the experiences all the same, and we provide the same sort of trauma-informed response that we can. But I would say a unique need that a lot of foreign-born individuals who are labor trafficked are in need of is legal services. And there are legal remedies for T visas and U visas for individuals who have experienced labor trafficking here in the United States.
What industries do you see are more common with labor trafficking? I know you stated domestic work and nanny work. Is there anything else that maybe people don't think of when they think of labor trafficking where it's really common?
Common industries could be nail salons, landscaping crews, tree cutting crews, a lot of unskilled labor industries, and agriculture, and our guest worker visa programs. Both individuals who may be in status or out of status can be at very high risk for being labor exploited here in the United States. And a lot of common industries are industries where we don't maybe have a ready pool of a supply of workers. And we find that contractors, big companies, may prey upon the vulnerabilities of an undocumented or a guest worker who is coming to just part of the year to try to make extra money and go back home. And they will use methods of threatening deportation, threatening their families back in their home countries as a way to maintain them working in these industries like landscaping, tree cutting, agriculture. Traveling sales crews has been one as well that's come up, and nail salons, massage parlors. They'll threaten what's most important to them. So family back home, their own livelihood, their own status, as a means to control them and to keep them silent, and unpaid or severely underpaid.
And you work only domestically in the United States, correct?
We serve individuals from anywhere, but we work in the United States.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because you said massage parlors, and that reminded me of, massage parlors are a huge thing as far as sex trafficking goes in Canada. It's very often that people find this loophole in the law that allows them to run something like that. So it just reminded me of that. I didn't know if maybe you also worked in Canada.
No, but the United States has a big issue, with massage parlors as venues for both labor exploitation and sexual exploitation. There's a number of cases in any state. You could Google like massage parlors, human trafficking bust, or massage parlors and prostitution bust, and you would find news article hits to that. Unfortunately, we shouldn't be calling it prostitution because that's making the assumption that those individuals are there willingly, and we have to peel back the layers of coercive control to recognize that they 99% of the time are not there 100% willingly.
There's so many things I hadn't considered before learning a lot more about human trafficking. I was a teenager, and my parents, were warning me because I wanted to go get a massage. I was like, hey, I found this massage parlor. And my stepdad was like, okay, but I want the address. I'm coming with you. I'm going to check it out before you go in. I'm talking to the staff, because he explained, there are people who are trafficked out of massage parlors. And I was like, you're crazy. I was like, no. But it's a thing. And there's so many things that are under our nose that people do not know about. And that's exactly why things like this, where we are getting the word out about what is happening, is so important. That way people are more aware of the situations. What role do you see consumer awareness playing in combating labor trafficking?
I think consumers have a huge role in impacting labor trafficking. So whether we think about purchasing fair trade, those are some of our obvious points that we often go to, buy ethically sourced, fair traded goods and materials, and that is certainly good, and we should do that. I think other ways that we don't always make the connection on, that I'm going to tie back to what I was saying earlier about the industries in which we often see individuals here in domestic soil being labor trafficked, is leveraging your purchasing power as a consumer when you're engaging in service industry, purchasing services. So whether you're getting your nails done, trying to just get to know the venue you're in. Do people seem fearful? Are they free to come and go? Are they sleeping in the same location that they're working? None of these things on their own mean someone's being trafficked. So we don't want to create this panic, right? Because that can be the other detrimental side. But be an informed purchaser. Look at the humanity of the folks that you're engaging with when you hire a landscaping crew. If you do that and you can afford for that, talk to the main contractor or others who you're hiring to get to know who they're sending to your house early in the morning. Because we often don't even look at those people. They just come and they leave. But are they getting paid? Do they look like they're well clothed? They look healthy? Will they talk to you if you just say, good morning, how are you? Can I give you some water? And those will give you signs if somebody has some level of freedom in the employment that they're doing, or if they're fearful, they can't talk to you. Maybe they don't have answers as to where they're staying. Maybe they don't really know much about what job they're working on because they're just being carted around. Those can be red flags. So we have a lot of purchasing power. I don't hire folks often, but we hired roofers to redo our roof 5 years ago, and we got pizza for the roofing crew. We tried to talk to the people. We asked the main contractor if he was paying all of his guys and women at least minimum wage for the work that they were doing. Do they have insurance? Sometimes we try to drive down our prices of things that we're engaging in, but we don't realize that the best price doesn't always mean that the people who are doing the labor are then being paid. Because if you add it up and you see how many people show up and you're like, I only paid this, then you kind of can sometimes actually even see, are the people who are here being fairly treated, because I know what I paid. And so just asking yourself some more questions, and asking the folks that you're engaging with in purchasing services, using your power to say, I have the right to kind of ask about the employees and how do you treat them, and this is important to me, and I want to make sure that you're being fair. So having some of those conversations can at least give you some more, using your purchasing power to protect the people that you hire, or at least raise some red flags. And then, of course, if I'll share that for those listening, if you're concerned, then report something. You can report it to your local authorities if you're concerned, and ask them to look into it. Look into a contractor. Be like, I'm concerned because I've been educated on labor trafficking, and I just talked to this contractor, and maybe you choose not to hire him or her. But instead you call your local authorities. Be like, I think you should look into them because they don't seem to be treating their workers well, like, whatever it is. And hopefully your local authorities will do that due diligence and follow up, and it will go somewhere to help save those people's lives. You also can report it to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and those tips will go out to federal and local law enforcement to further investigate.
Do you have any suggestions on maybe what people who work in the anti-human trafficking space or law enforcement can do differently that may give off a safer, what's the word? Like a safer energy, because I know that there's tension, in the way that law enforcement has interacted with trafficking survivors. It makes them come off as like you can't be trusted. So do you have any suggestions of changes that can happen?
Really just coming from an air of understanding. I dislike the use of the term victim, but basically you were a victim in this, and we're not going to put you in jail for this. This is something that you need help with, and we are here to help you. We are not here to prosecute you. We are here to help you. Yeah, just to have an air of compassion and understanding is really, I think, the key.
What role do you see socioeconomic disparities play in making individuals vulnerable to domestic human trafficking?
Well, for me, I was in the foster care system when my exploitation began. And, we see a lot of predators groom children, not excluding women, grooming children in the foster care system. And for me, it was easy, I feel like, because, I was introduced into that kind of world by another girl. And I was in a position where I felt I needed money. And so I was easily exploited and just easily preyed upon.
I'm sorry that happened to you. Statistically, there's 70 to 80% of foster kids who end up being exploited at some point, which is horrible. And that kind of hits home for me. That's like a big reason why I became very invested in human trafficking. We have about 20 adopted kids in my family, and a lot of them were adopted out of the foster system. I also had a best friend in high school who was in the foster system, and certain things happened to her along those lines. So it's a horrible statistic, but it just shows you how many good people we need to step up and actually open their homes so that a child doesn't end up in the home of someone who's going to take advantage of them. Jamie, did you have anything to add to that?
I echo the statistics, and I think that Evie did a really great job talking about just both her experience and also just the statistics that we know. The system that's supposed to protect individuals is often a system that keeps them at high risk.
How did you see the pandemic play a role in human trafficking? Did you see an increase in a number of cases?
So PEHT opened our first residential home. I say our first because we just opened our second, which is pretty amazing.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so we opened our first residential home, and as Evie shared, she was our first resident ever to come to us in the midst of COVID. My goodness. I remember we met Evie sitting outside trying to eat pizza 6 feet apart. But we also opened our doors after the initial 6-week shutdown. So we were a unique nonprofit that started in the midst of COVID, and we began all of our work in person. So we required staff to be on site because we just felt like that was really important for the healing process. Of course, we faced numerous challenges, but I can tell you that as soon as we told the community of providers, none of whom were shut down, right, just because the pandemic was around, didn't change the fact that people were being exploited. And so people needed housing and people needed recovery services still. And there was a lack of available services and in-person services for people who really needed them. So we definitely saw an increase. There's not a lot of comparative info for PEHT, although comparatively in the anti-trafficking movement, there was certainly a rise in online exploitation, different forms of internet sextortion cases grew up astronomically, as we saw at the big tech hearings that happened before the Senate Judiciary Committee a little over a month ago. Right? There's NCMEC has a statistic that I'm probably going to misquote, but pretty much I think 300%. They saw a 300% increase in online sextortion reported cases from 2021 to 2023 or 2020 to 2023. Just an astronomical rise. And I think that is connected. It's not just a coincidence, right? It's connected to the way we've pushed so many young people and young adults into online learning, and lack of social connection really, I think, drove up those vulnerabilities. And so that was similar for us. I mean, as a housing provider, the second we opened our doors, we had enough referrals to fill all of our beds and remained full throughout the past 4 years. So much so that we opened a second home just this past month. And we've received enough referrals to fill even our second home already. So there's certainly an ongoing need for services. But COVID exacerbated a lot of those inequalities that people faced, right? There was a luxury of working from home that not everybody was obviously afforded.
And the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear that is God's perfect timing. I mean, you and the organization were in the right place at the right time when you were needed the most. And that's just what comes to my mind when I hear that. Yeah, thank God for you guys in the middle of the pandemic. What about now? Does the current trend of human trafficking look like it's increasing? Because, you did say it's between 2021 and 23, it's been a 300% increase. Would you say that you're still seeing it rise, or just about the same?
So, and just to clarify, that's with like online sextortion cases, which is not
Okay.
necessarily sex trafficking.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify that so I don't like cause a panic that that I have a statistic no one has. And you can go to NCMEC's website, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and that's kind of where that research comes from. But so, and I'm happy for any Evee or to jump in on this too. I hesitate to say that there's a rise. I think that trafficking data, human trafficking, sex trafficking, labor trafficking, has just been so poorly documented over the decades that is there an increase? Probably. There is. So globally, the International Labor Organization updated their statistics on the number of people globally that is estimated to be in forms of modern day slavery as defined by the International Labor Organization. And I believe they updated their statistic from 47 million people in the world to 52 million people in the world globally at any given point in time. They just recently last year updated that. So clearly our global community is recognizing the increase. And I certainly would echo that as similar. But I also always caution folks to realize that this problem has been in our communities, and we have to open our eyes to seeing it, right? To seeing all of the individuals who are right within our communities, who are in our schools, who are in our justice-involved youth programs, and adults who are seeking housing, substance abuse treatment, just high vulnerable populations. But certainly the internet and the demand for the commercial sex industry, I would say with the internet has constantly been on the rise. And the demand for cheap labor as globalization has increased our global markets, that has certainly contributed to an ongoing demand for cheap goods, which pushes down vulnerable people in labor. So actually, my answer would be yes, it is increasing. I just think that our statistics are so poor, and we need to just do a better job at tracking data so that we can affirmatively give the public those answers. But this is a hard crime to track.
What legal avenues are available or other resources for survivors who may be in a situation where there could be retaliation?
I mean, there's different avenues for individuals who identify as a victim, as survivor, as they're rebuilding, but it's not perfect, right? I mean, it's oftentimes individuals have to really take a lot of ownership around their own safety. So changing a phone number, turning off location services on your phone, kind of depends on the dynamics of your trafficker and how they operate. And so understanding that is important, and talking with an advocate to help look at your safety risks and then like what are your options to make yourself safer. Using undisclosed addresses is a portion of our program, so we don't list publicly the addresses of our residential care homes. We don't give out identities of those that we serve, so we take a lot of measures to protect anonymity. We also can support individuals in forms of like where they get their mail, name changes. And then, of course, if somebody's part of federal investigations, this wouldn't be us as a service provider, but law enforcement has tools, for witness protection programs for individuals. But what we find is that individuals really have the hard work of recovering, keeping oneself safe, often falls on the burden and the shoulders of the survivor as they navigate their life after trafficking. And so as victim service providers, we just need to find means to support individuals as they take those steps, changing all of their, contacts so that people from the life can't continue to find where they are, maybe getting off social media, and just being mindful of ways that people in this technology age can find you.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. What role would you say victim advocates play in supporting survivors through legal processes?
Well, my victim's advocate kind of came in a bit later. My victim's advocate has kind of been more of kind of a moral support for me, which has honestly, I mean, it's been really, really important anyway. It might sound like moral support might not be very helpful in the scheme of things, but it has been really helpful. And he also has given me certain resources, like if I've needed to connect with someone, but mostly it has been moral support. So, cheering me on, you're doing a great job, keep going, or when I'm feeling vulnerable, giving me support in that way.
Okay. It makes total sense that having someone on your team dedicated to you and supporting you is a huge thing. A lot of people don't have that through family or what have you, so it's a big deal. Do you do any victims advocacy work right now?
Personally, I do the survivor advocacy stuff, the speaking engagements, as we're doing, going sometimes to, maybe speak at a church, things like that. So it's a bit different. Just kind of speaking on my experience rather than technical knowledge, I guess.
Okay. I was just curious. So, do any of you have a word of encouragement for a survivor who may be listening?
I would say you can overcome your trauma. You're stronger than your pain, and you are not alone.
I would say to encourage anyone listening to know that there is hope after experiencing exploitation, and to know that there are people out there that can support you in that process, and people that are dedicated 24/7. And I know that I can be incredibly frustrating and hard to navigate systems, but encouragement to not give up, because hopefully you can eventually find the right fit for support and recovery, and that you deserve it, right? Everybody deserves to live free from exploitation. Everyone.